Oral questions by members.
Leader of the Official Opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last week, we proposed our plan to apply BC's carbon tax to U.S. thermal coal being shipped through BC ports. The Premier says that he brought it to the Federal Council. Will the Premier today tell this House how much progress is being made and when this can be expected to come to the House?
Minister of Energy.
Well, thank you very much, Honourable Speaker. And as you know, the Government of British Columbia is part of a Team Canada effort to respond to tariffs in the United States. One that builds our province, strengthens our province, diversifies our markets, and works with other jurisdictions. That is precisely what we're doing in this case. And that means when issues are raised here, we take issues forward to the federal government and we work together as a team. I know and I'm hopeful, and we're all hopeful, that the Leader of the Opposition's pursuit of this issue means that he will support the government as we defend Canadians and British Columbians against these tariffs.
Leader of the Official Opposition, supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. And I guess I shouldn't have expected an answer with regards to the progress. But, Mr. Speaker, here's a reality. It's been 8 years, and no softwood lumber agreement, and our forest industry is in shambles. Over 8 years, this government fought hard against the Trans Mountain Pipeline, against the ability to diversify trade. Eight years, this government has closed all 13 trade offices that we had, destroying the opportunity for diversification. 8 years, at least this government initially started, trying to block Site C and the energy that we need. The list could go on and on. So my question through you, Mr. Speaker, to the Premier is this. Why has this government continuously fought economic diversification every step of the way for 8 long years?
Minister of Finance.
Thank you very much, Honourable Speaker, and the member couldn't be more wrong. We have been deeply focused on economic diversification, and I can speak from my own personal experience. Honourable Speaker.
Members.
Mr. Speaker, the other side likes to portray things that in fact are not entirely accurate. For example, the portrayal that we shut all these offices and our trade and investment workers went away. I personally, when I was in the private sector, took advantage of those wonderful people doing this work. They're on the ground, they're working for us every day. People are working in Korea, in Japan, in Singapore, in Vietnam, in Mexico. I could go on and on and on. We have 50 representatives in 14 offices, Honourable Speaker, helping our businesses get access to the markets that they need. This is important work. It is ongoing work, and it's one of the reasons that our trade exposure is 54% instead of 75% or higher like in Ontario and Quebec. This is important work, and we will continue to do it.
Member for Kamloops North. Sorry, Centre.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Well, that is astounding that the minister is trying to give us a lecture on accuracy of statements in this House. You know, 3 times now, Mr. Speaker, over the last month and a half or so, this minister has stood up with great fanfare talking about hiring freezes in the BC public sector and how they're going to bring costs under control, how they're going to get things under control, because despite, by their words, a good economy, we're running record deficits. Lord help us if the economy falters. So let's look at that time frame, what has happened with this government. In that time frame, this minister has signed off, and the cabinet has signed off on 36 new hires and promotions, 19 of them directly under the Ministry of Finance's direction. And, Mr. Speaker, these aren't frontline workers. No, no, no. These are public affairs officers, marketing officers, issues management directors, and it's all partisan spin doctors. Why is this government prioritizing more political spin doctors over frontline services?
Minister of Finance.
I hope you caught that.
Honourable Speaker, thank you very much. Thank you to the member opposite for the question. We have brought in a hiring freeze for our public service. This is an important hiring freeze that allows us to essentially flatline our public service growth, and you'll see that continuing in the budget that we'll be introducing tomorrow. The way that it works is that when there is a vacancy, that vacancy is evaluated as to whether it's needed, and there are many examples where we need to fill those vacancies. There are also many examples where we don't, and that decision is made very carefully by the head of the public service under guidelines which are being followed.
Member supplemental.
Thank you. Sorry, I wasn't sure if they were going to applaud that. Mr. Speaker, it's very clear that this government has lost their way. We have no clear direction on the tariff file. Their cabinet minister in charge, of that all-star team seems to be more worried about the state of triplex construction in Oak Bay than dealing with the tariff issue. And now we have this minister talking about hiring freezes when the record shows the exact opposite. And if in fact it's a shifting of numbers of people to flatline, as the minister is talking about, I'll remind the government, this is a government hanging on by a thread because they're supposed to be getting propped up by the Green Party. Perhaps the Green Party would like to know that in southern British Columbia right now, as we speak, the Ministry of Environment is actually removing frontline on the ground biologists and other workers, so the government has $4.2 million to put on paychecks for government spin doctors. Why is this government prioritizing the hiring of spin doctors over staff in the Ministry of Environment that work on the ground daily?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. There were many things in that dog's breakfast of a question, but I'll speak originally and first to the question about tariffs. To suggest that we have not been moving forward on tariffs is ridiculous. We have been stepping in strongly on this question in a number of different ways. Our Premier has been leading provinces, very involved in the response across provinces and with the federal government, responding very strongly as part of Team Canada, deeply important. We're working on diversifying our economy both at home and abroad. Minister Gibson has been doing excellent work across the province on this important question, and we're focused on strengthening on our economy. You asked the question, member, I'm giving you an answer. Among many other things, the member has also said that somehow we're hiring more people into marketing roles. The truth of it is, GCPE staffed down in anticipation of the election. That's actually good fiscal management, knowing that their services would not be as needed, and they've been staffing up since, saving us money.
Leader of the third party.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Perhaps something that we can all agree on. As we've just honoured on the South Lawn, firefighters put service over self, risking their lives every day for our communities, a fact that has become all the more poignant as climate-fueled wildfires impact every part of our province. Firefighters across BC have raised concerns about health and environmental risks from per- and polyfluoroalkyl substances, PFAS, carcinogenic forever chemicals they're exposed to in their workplaces. Yet PFAS are still widely used in fire suppression foams. On the day of the BC Fallen Firefighter Memorial, it's vital that we heed their concerns. Honourable Speaker, through you to the Minister of Public Safety and Solicitor General, will this government invest in the health of BC firefighters by transitioning to PFAS-free fire suppression foam?
Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Thank you to the member opposite for the question. Firefighters put themselves in the line of danger every day and as they save life and property. While many firefighters are paid employees, many of them are volunteers. We recognize this. In fact, most communities in British Columbia rely on volunteer firefighters to protect their property, and I commend them all for the service that they do to this province. Our government supports fire departments through investments in training and equipment. Since 2017, more than $17 million has been provided to firefighters and composite fire departments through the Ministry of Energy Management and Climate Readiness. Last year, the province provided more than $6 million for 122 local projects supporting 200-plus fire departments. Mental health peer supports for all 15 volunteer fire departments in the Cowichan Valley. Upgrading and replacing equipment for Sandspit volunteer firefighters.
Thank you, ma'am.
New relay tanks, hands-on training, personnel and demonstration props, all to fire departments.
Thank you.
I am pleased to be meeting this week with some of these firefighters, and I'm going to continue to work with them for the safety of the province.
Thank you. Leader of the third party supplemental.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. While we appreciate the recent strides that have been made, our firefighters deserve better. Studies suggest that firefighters are 3 times more likely to die of cancer than the general population. Cancer is still the leading cause of fatality claims among Canadian firefighters. Despite being classified as one of the most high-risk occupations for carcinogens, firefighters across the province are unable to access coverage for early cancer screenings that could be life-saving. Through you, Honourable Speaker, to the Minister of Health, will this government commit to a proactive health screening program for firefighters to ensure we are looking after those who look after us?
Minister of Health.
Thank you so much, Honourable Speaker, and thank you so much to the member for the question. And it is a good question to ask today because we have the firefighters here with us, and of course, over the lunch hour, we had the opportunity to celebrate and to mark the incredible dedication that these women and men have and how they put their lives on the line. And Mr. Speaker, that includes, as the member refers to, the exposure to carcinogens and to other aspects of danger that can really put their lives in risk. And Mr. Speaker, supporting the health and well-being of frontline workers like firefighters is one of our top priorities. And being able to access early cancer screening for the prevention and detection of cancers is a key plank in helping to keep all people in British Columbia safe and well. We offer 4 different cancer screening programs here in British Columbia, Mr. Speaker. But of course, we need to be continually reviewing those criteria and ensuring that people, especially groups of our populations like firefighters who could be at more risk, are there. So, Mr. Speaker, I've had the opportunity to meet with the BC Professional Firefighters Association on this. I've heard them, and I've asked BC Cancer to review the criteria that are used and the issue of recognizing the unique risks that firefighters may face, and I look forward to reporting more on that. Thank you again.
Member for Langley Walnut Grove.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You wake up to the fire alarm. You smell smoke. You head for your apartment's staircase to find that it's on fire. You're stuck. Your building has 1 staircase and you're 6 stories above the ground, hoping that your fire department can come rescue you. Mr. Speaker, this isn't the plot of a daytime soap opera. This is the reality created by this government when they removed the 2-staircase requirement from the building code. Why has this Premier removed fire safety from British Columbians and from our frontline firefighters?
Minister of Housing.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I want to thank the member for the question. And I want to welcome firefighters in the House here today, in particular, the good people from Delta. This is not a question to be heckling on. The Leader of Opposition.
Let them finish.
I can't believe the Leader of Opposition heckles a question of safety and importance to the community. But
Members, the question was very clear about the issue. Let the member answer, Minister, answer the question now.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. It's important to note that with the change, there's measures put in place to make sure the buildings are safe. We have limited to 6 stories. Sprinklers are a necessity and a requirement of any buildings that go forward. Wider stairwells, smoke management system, Honourable Speaker. And also, Honourable Speaker, it's important to note that we're not the only jurisdiction to do this. Seattle has allowed this since 1977. New York has allowed it for over a decade now, Honourable Speaker. In fact, I met with Seattle fire officials who informed me.
Members. Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. And what the fire officials have informed me is that with these additional measures and what they've seen in Seattle, they have not seen a significant increase in any way to the effectiveness of the safety measures for that building, Honourable Speaker. So we're going to continue to work with fire officials, Honourable Speaker, but it's vitally important that we look at this housing crisis with a new lens, try to create more suites that are bigger for families, allow for bigger bedrooms, Honourable Speaker. That's the balance we've found in this change, Honourable Speaker, and we're going to continue to engage with fire officials as we move forward.
Member supplemental. Member.
You cannot use flawed data. You cannot compare rural BC paid call halls with Seattle. Different requirements. The Fire Chiefs Association of BC, the BC Professional Firefighters Association, and the Greater Vancouver Fire Chiefs Association, that's who's ringing the alarm bell on this issue. A single point of egress simply puts lives at risk. It is the government's job to keep our people safe. My municipality has invested $50 million in the last 2 years alone for our constituents and for our firefighters. This Premier needs to look up into this gallery and tell the firefighters and the members sitting here today and out on the front lines as we speak, why are they cutting fire safety in British Columbia?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. First off, I have to correct the member. These buildings are not allowed in rural communities. Members implied that rural communities are included. It's only where communities where there's professional fire service. So that's an important measure. Perhaps the member might want to check in with where she got that source from. Honourable Speaker. Members, again incorrect. But that's okay. We'll continue with the question, Honourable Speaker. It's important, and I can share with the member that just this last week, another important research out of the U.S. was released by the Pew Charitable Trust. Oh, the member says this is Honourable Speaker. The member says this is Canada, not U.S. When we voted to send Trump a message last week, 5 of their members voted with the U.S., Honourable Speaker, and now they're lecturing us.
Both sides. Order, members. Surrey Cloverdale. Members. Minister will conclude.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. Again, the Pew Charitable Society did a review of New York and Seattle, and they found over the last 15 years that they could find no evidence that with sprinkler systems and all the measures, safety measures put in, that these buildings are less safe, Honourable Speaker. We continue to look at the research. We continue to find ways to make sure that we can continue to have more housing options, bigger units for families that are much needed in all of our communities, Honourable Speaker, and done in a safe way.
Member for Langley, Abbotsford.
Mr. Speaker, the Kootenay ferry strike is costing locals financially, but it's devastating their mental health. A woman from Kootenay Lake contacted me and said due to the ferry strike, her husband's work has cut his hours, costing him $1,000 a month and his pride. They're falling behind on their bills. Fortis is threatening to cut off their power, and she fears her husband will self-harm again. Mr. Speaker, 8 years ago today, I lost my father. I have witnessed seeing how my mom's hardships were, being a single mother afterwards. Mr. Speaker, my question to you, will this government finally act and designate increased ferry services levels as essential so Kootenay families and businesses can get their lives back?
Minister of Labour.
Thank you very much, Speaker, and I thank the member for the question. And I want to say that I understand that people in the Kootenays rely on the ferry system, and I appreciate that they are frustrated with the current disruptions caused by the dispute. And I know that the parties have been at the table all last week through the weekend. I have urged the parties to work with urgency and diligence to resolve this collective bargaining dispute so that life can get back to normal for folks in the ferries. And I continue to state and to send that message that we need folks to be bargaining with urgency and diligence, and we need them to move through and conclude this process so that folks in the Kootenays can get back to normal.
Member for Prince George Mackenzie.
Mr. Speaker, the opposition has been calling on the Minister of Labour to designate better essential service levels during the Kootenay Lake labour dispute. Residents and businesses shouldn't have to suffer. We've also been clear that we support getting a fair contract through negotiations. But yet the minister does have tools and yet has continued to stay on the sidelines even though there are clear options. It's time to get Vince Reddy on speed dial or a senior minister or senior mediator. Through you, Mr. Speaker, to the minister, will she commit today to appointing a special mediator?
Minister.
Thank you, Speaker, and again, thank you to the member for the question. I understand how frustrating it is for the community when important services are not available, and I will just remind the House that the phrase "essential service" has very specific meaning and definition under the BC Labour Relations Code, and that this dispute is in fact governed by.
Member. Minister will conclude.
This dispute is in fact governed by the Labour Relations Code. The board has issued essential services order, and I know that the board is monitoring that order, and that there is, of course, opportunity for community members to express their concerns to the board. But I will say that my message to the parties in this dispute is ensure that you are working with urgency and diligence to resolve this dispute.
Member for Kelowna Mission.
Mr. Speaker, it took a near-death political experience for the Premier to decide he wanted to reset his relationship with the business community. What gets measured gets managed in business, and a series of NDP jobs ministers have delivered virtually zero private sector job growth, while public sector employment swole by 36% under this government. And yet, this Premier keeps rewarding failure by promoting his failed jobs ministers. Two questions. Can the Premier tell the business community what measurable target he has given his latest jobs minister for private sector job growth in 2025? And can he tell us what it would take to actually get fired from his cabinet for poor performance, or does he only fire people for being Jewish?
Minister of Jobs and Economic Development.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The member opposite is leaning on rhetoric rather than fact. BC's unemployment rate has been below the national average. In January, BC gained 10,300 private sector jobs, third highest among the provinces for private sector job growth. And Mr. Speaker, just to clarify, in case the member opposite has failed to hear that properly, that's private sector job growth. BC has outpaced this nation. BC has outpaced this nation in real GDP growth BC has been amongst the leading provinces in the last 5 years and continues to leverage private sector investment, significant private sector investment, and will continue to do so as we face, Mr. Speaker, what is an unprecedented challenge. We know, north and south of the border, citizens and businesses are going to be hurt deeply by the tariffs and these threats that are coming as economic challenges we're facing. Our government is standing strong with businesses across BC, working to strengthen our economy, and we expect both sides of the House should be stepping up to lean into real facts and figures and really work with our businesses to respond to this challenge.
Member for Penticton Summerland.
Mr. Speaker, last year 103 children died while receiving government services from MCFD. Given that only 9 of the current 72 recommendations from the Representative for Children and Youth have been implemented, my question is what immediate actions is the Minister of Children and Family Development taking to ensure that no further deaths occur on MCFD's watch?
Minister of Children and Family Development.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and I want to thank the member for the question. Anytime a child dies in this province, it is devastating and horrific, Honourable Speaker. I wake up every single morning and go to bed every single night with the sacred stories of children in this province. Anytime a child or family comes into interaction with MCFD, it can be at some of the most challenging times of their lives. Our frontline workers have some of the most challenging work that they have to do. And so immediately our government stood up after the Don't Look Away report that was tabled by the Representative of Children and Youth and took action immediately to ensure that our social workers and frontline workers were looking at checking in with families, ensuring that they had the supports and services that they needed. Over the last number of years, we have increased our frontline workforce by 20%. There's always more work to be done, Honourable Speaker. I look to working with the member opposite on this file collaboratively and will continue to work diligently every day.
Thank you. Member supplemental.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Over the last 3 years, 62% of the children in care that died were Indigenous. Again, to the Minister of Children and Family Development, what is being done to address the systemic inequality that is leading to the disproportionate deaths of Indigenous children?
Minister.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker. There is a disproportionate number of Indigenous youth in this province due to the impacts of residential school system and colonization, Honourable Speaker. There are a number of steps that we are taking. We know that children and youth have better outcomes when they're connected to their culture, their family, and their communities. Our province was the very first province to hire an Indigenous child welfare director. We are working with Indigenous communities to ensure the resumption of jurisdiction over children and families in this province. We have signed 4 coordination agreements and are working very closely with Indigenous communities because we know that they love their children and are able to care for their children best, Honourable Speaker. There is a lot of work to be done, still more work to be done, and committed to working with the member opposite on this.
Member for Chilliwack North.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In the last 5 years, 318 Indigenous youth have died from overdose. More and more every day. Many of these deaths were a result of the government's safe supply experiment. It's tragic when any child dies, but this government continues to feed the fire that is consuming our youth. Mr. Speaker, how many more deaths, how many more children have to die before this government will end this experiment?
Minister of Health.
Thank you, Honourable Speaker, and thank you to the member for their question. It's an incredibly serious one, and one that we know has impacted the lives of people in British Columbia, communities large and small. Mr. Speaker, the member is correct that this has disproportionately impacted Indigenous communities, and that's why it is so important that we continue to take every step possible through the entire spectrum of
Members, please finish.
Mr. Speaker, that's why we're going to continue to invest in prevention, in mental health supports for youth, in mental health supports specifically for Indigenous peoples, Mr. Speaker, in the treatment and recovery so that we build out the full continuum of care and do everything that we can to remove the scourge of this toxic drug crisis. Thank you.
The bell ends the question period.